When the decision was made, it felt almost like destiny. She had always dreamed of owning a home, but the idea of actually making it happen seemed like something that belonged to other people, the ones who had the money or the luck. She never thought it would be her, yet there she was, standing in front of an old cottage in a small town that felt like a postcard come to life. The house wasn't much to look at, just a modest two-story building with a lot of character. The faded red brick had a weathered charm, and the roof, though a little sagging in places, had a sense of history. The ivy that crept up the walls gave the cottage an air of mystery, like it was hiding secrets of its own. But it was perfect for her, in a way that made her feel like she could belong there. She had spent months searching for a home that felt like the one. She'd gotten used to the disappointment of each place not being quite right. The apartments were either too small or too noisy, and the houses were either too expensive or in terrible condition. But this one felt different. There was something about the place that called to her, something she couldn't explain, but she knew she needed to try. The price had been reasonable too, which made it even more tempting. In fact, it was almost too good to be true. She had walked through the rooms of the house more than once, trying to picture herself living there. The wooden floors creaked as she moved from room to room, and the sunlight streamed through the old windows in a way that made everything feel warm. The kitchen, though a little outdated, had potential. Just some new paint, a few modern touches, and it would be perfect. The living room had a fireplace, something she had always wanted, and the bedrooms were spacious, offering room for her to grow and settle down. The realtor had been eager to sell. She had never really questioned it, though. The place had been on the market for a few months, which meant the owners wanted out. Maybe it had something to do with the age of the house. Old houses sometimes had their quirks. The realtor had said it was mostly cosmetic repairs, and honestly, she wasn't afraid of a little work. After all, wasn't buying a house about making it your own? When the paperwork was finally signed, it felt surreal. She had spent weeks going back and forth with the bank, trying to get everything in order. Now everything was settled. The house was hers, or at least it would be once she moved in. The day she received the keys, she stood in the living room and took a deep breath. It was hers. Everything in that moment felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. The walls were bare and the floors were clean, but it was a blank canvas waiting for her to make it into a home. The first few days after moving in were filled with excitement and a little bit of stress. The boxes piled up in the living room, most of them still unpacked. The house smelled like old wood and dust, the kind of smell that came from years of things being stored away. But she didn't mind it. She actually liked it. It felt like the house had history, like it had been waiting for someone to come along and give it new life. By the time she had started unpacking, the house had already begun to show its true colors. There were things she hadn't noticed during the walkthroughs, things that seemed small at first but soon started to stand out. The floors, though charming, had deep scratches and dings from years of use. Some of the windows wouldn't close all the way, letting in drafts that made the house feel colder than it should have been. The walls, though beautifully weathered, were thin, and she could hear every car that passed by outside. But none of that bothered her. She was here now. The imperfections were part of what made the place feel special. She loved the idea of restoring something old, something with a story to tell. It made her feel like she was a part of that story, like she had a role to play in its next chapter. It wasn't until she started exploring the attic that things began to get interesting. The attic was one of those spaces she hadn't paid much attention to at first. It was dark and dusty, full of old boxes and unused furniture. She figured it would be a good place to store things she didn't need at the moment. But when she ventured up there, she found something unexpected. Behind a stack of old trunks, she noticed something strange, an opening in the wall. It wasn't large, but it was there, a small gap between the wooden beams. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she carefully made her way over to it. The gap seemed to lead to a small hidden space, one that had been covered up and forgotten. With a little effort, she pulled away the boards covering the gap, revealing an old wooden trunk tucked away in the corner. It was worn, the leather straps cracked and faded, but there was something about it that made her heart race. It felt like she had discovered a secret, something that had been hidden away for years. She dragged the trunk into the light and opened it slowly, as if expecting something to jump out at her. But inside there was no skeleton, no dusty relics from the past. Instead, there were old photographs, antique coins, and a stack of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. Her heart skipped a beat as she sifted through the contents of the trunk. The photographs were black and white, showing the house when it was still new, when the ivy had yet to grow up the walls and the yard had been a neat garden. There were people in the photos, standing in front of the house smiling at the camera, but none of them looked familiar. The coins were even more puzzling. They were old, very old in fact, and some of them were unlike anything she had ever seen before. She could tell they were valuable, though the meaning behind them eluded her. She wasn't a collector of antiques, but these seemed special. And then there was the bundle of letters. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, and the words seemed to tell a story that she couldn't yet understand. At that moment, a thought crossed her mind. What if this was part of something bigger, something the house was hiding? The more she thought about it, the more she felt like she had uncovered a mystery, something the previous owners had left behind, intentionally or not. She spent the rest of the afternoon in the attic piecing together the puzzle. The letters seemed to be from someone named Henry Brooks, the original owner of the house. The name sounded familiar, though she couldn't place where she had heard it before. There were references to old family traditions, to treasures hidden away for safekeeping, and to the idea that certain things were meant to stay hidden from the world. She tucked everything back into the trunk, carefully covering it with a cloth. The idea that she had found something significant thrilled her. She had never thought much about the history of the house when she bought it. But now she couldn't help but wonder what other secrets it might be hiding. As the day came to a close, she looked around the room, feeling a sense of connection to the house that she hadn't felt before. It was no longer just a place to live, it was a mystery to solve. And in that moment, she knew her simple home purchase had just turned into something much, much more. Over the next few days, she couldn't stop thinking about the trunk in the attic. Every time she went to bed, the images of the photographs, the strange coins, and the letters filled her mind. She wondered what they meant and why they had been hidden away for so long. More than anything, she felt like there was something important she had yet to discover, something that connected the house to a past that was much deeper than she had ever imagined. But the days quickly turned into weeks, and as much as she tried to focus on settling into her new life, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play. She had spent hours combing through the letters, but they weren't much help. The handwriting was beautiful but difficult to decipher at times, and the messages were cryptic. They spoke of hidden treasures, of family secrets, and of something called the map. But there were no clear answers, no direct instructions. Just vague references that only deepened the mystery. It wasn't until she mentioned her discovery to the neighbor that things started to take an unexpected turn. The neighbor was an older man, someone who had lived in the area for decades. He had watched the house change hands over the years, seen families come and go, but he'd never really paid much attention to the specifics of the property itself. However, when she told him about the trunk in the attic, his expression changed. "That old house has a story, all right," he said slowly, his eyes narrowing in a way that made her feel like she was being let in on a secret. The original owner was Henry Brooks. He was a peculiar man, always tinkering with something or other. Not many people knew him well, but he had his ways. I've heard rumors that he was more than just an inventor. She was intrigued. Until now, all she knew about Henry Brooks was what the realtor had told her. He was just the person who had built the house all those years ago, a quiet man who had passed away many years before she ever considered buying the place. But now, hearing the neighbor's words, she realized that there was much more to the man and to the house than she had been led to believe. He had a lot of strange ideas, the neighbor continued, looking over his shoulder as though someone might be listening. Some folks thought he was a little off, always going on about hidden treasures and lost artifacts. There were rumors about secret compartments and hidden rooms, but nobody really paid much attention. After he died, people just forgot about it all. She felt a chill run down her spine. Hidden rooms? Secret compartments? That sounded exactly like what she had found in the attic. The idea that Henry Brooks had been involved in something more than just building a house, that there might be something buried beneath the surface, made her pulse quicken. But what was it? What was he hiding and why? The neighbor seemed to notice her growing excitement, and he leaned in closer. "There's a map, he said, lowering his voice as if the words themselves were fragile. "It's said to be hidden somewhere in the house. A map of sorts, maybe a treasure map, maybe not. But it's what led to all the talk about hidden treasures. If you find it, you might find something you didn't expect. She felt her heart beat faster. A map? Was this what the letters had been hinting at? Could it be that the map had been the key all along? The neighbor didn't offer any more details, though. He simply nodded to her and walked away, leaving her standing there with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain: she had to find that map. It felt like it was the missing piece, the link that would connect all the strange pieces of the puzzle together. The next few days were a blur of excitement and anxiety. She went through the attic again, searching every nook and cranny, hoping to find something that would lead her to the map. She examined every old book, every picture frame, and every hidden drawer in the hope that it would reveal its secrets. But nothing. It was as if the house was keeping its story locked away, just out of her reach. She even tried asking the realtor about the house's history, but the response was always the same. There was nothing unusual about it, just an old house with a few repairs needed. She began to wonder if the realtor knew more than they were letting on, or if they were just brushing off her questions. Either way, she wasn't going to give up. The more she thought about it, the more she became convinced that the house had a secret, and she was determined to uncover it. Then, one afternoon while cleaning out the basement, she found something unexpected. It wasn't much, just an old wooden chest tucked in the corner behind some old furniture. But when she opened it, she felt like she had stumbled upon a treasure trove of memories. Inside the chest were more old photos of the house, some even older than the ones in the attic trunk. But it wasn't the photos that caught her attention. It was the small rolled-up piece of parchment wedged between two frames. She pulled it out carefully, holding her breath as she unrolled it. It was a map, but not just any map. This one was different. The edges were frayed, and the ink had faded with time, but it was clear enough to make out certain details. The map depicted the house and the surrounding land, but there were strange symbols and markings scattered throughout. The most significant marking was on the garden, right where the old sundial stood. The map seemed to show a path leading from the house to a hidden location, but the route was unclear. There were lines drawn in a way that suggested secret passages or hidden compartments beneath the house, leading to something buried deep within the earth. The more she studied it, the more it seemed like the house itself was a puzzle, with every room and every floorboard hiding a clue. Excitedly, she ran to the garden to see if the sundial was indeed marked on the map. When she reached it, she found it standing there exactly as it had been in the photo. The sundial was old and worn, its surface cracked from years of exposure to the elements. But when she knelt down to examine it closely, she noticed something strange. A faint symbol carved into the stone beneath the sundial. It was a simple shape, almost like an arrow, pointing down toward the ground. Her heart skipped a beat. Was this the first clue? Was it possible that there was something buried beneath the sundial, something that had been hidden for years? She ran back to the house and grabbed a small shovel from the shed. Her hands trembled with anticipation as she returned to the garden, ready to dig. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the yard as she began to dig at the base of the sundial. The soil was soft, and it didn't take long before the shovel struck something hard. She paused, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly, she cleared away the dirt, revealing a small metal box, rusted and worn with age. It wasn't large, but it was heavy, and she could tell from the way it had been buried that it hadn't been disturbed in years. With trembling hands, she opened the box, her mind racing with possibilities. Inside there was a small collection of items, a few more antique coins, a folded piece of parchment, and an old key. The parchment was covered in delicate, curling handwriting, and as she read it, her eyes widened in disbelief. The letter spoke of a treasure hidden beneath the house, left behind by Henry Brooks himself. It described a vault, locked away for safekeeping, and a promise that the treasure would one day be found by someone who truly understood the importance of what was being hidden. The key, the letter explained, was the final clue. If she could unlock the vault, she would uncover a secret that had been lost to time. She stood there, breathless, clutching the letter and the key in her hands. The house had given up its first clue, and she had no idea where it would lead next. But one thing was certain. She was no longer just moving into a house. She was on the brink of a treasure hunt, one that had been waiting for her all along. She stood in the garden, the small metal box still clutched in her hand, her heart pounding with excitement. It felt as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted. She was no longer just a woman living in a quiet cottage. She was part of something much bigger, something ancient, perhaps even a bit mysterious, and far more thrilling than she could have ever imagined. The key, the letter, and the coins. The clues were starting to come together. But what was she supposed to do next? The letter spoke of a vault, of treasure hidden beneath the house, but it didn't explain how to find it. All it said was that the key will unlock what has been lost. It felt like she had entered the middle of a riddle with no clear way to solve it. With the evening sun beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard, she headed inside, eager to examine the key. It was a small, ornate thing, the metal dark with age. The intricate design looked old, almost medieval, with delicate patterns etched into its surface. She placed it on the kitchen table, tracing her fingers over the curves and edges. The key felt heavy in her palm, as though it carried the weight of the mystery it had been guarding for so long. Her first thought was to search the house, but where would she even begin? The map from the chest had shown the house's layout, but it didn't indicate where the vault might be. She had already checked the basement and the attic thoroughly. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Could there be something she had missed? Or was there a hidden door somewhere waiting to be discovered? The key seemed to be the final piece of the puzzle, but there was one problem. She had no idea what it unlocked. Determined not to waste any time, she decided to start from the beginning. The house itself had always felt a little off. Old, yes, but there were things about it that didn't quite make sense. The creaky floorboards, the strangely placed beams, and the way the walls seemed to have little spaces in between them. It was as if the house had been built to hide things, to keep secrets from prying eyes. Maybe she needed to look at it differently, approach it as a puzzle rather than just a home. She started with the fireplace. It had always been one of her favorite features in the house, the warm stone hearth that sat at the heart of the living room. But as she stood before it now, she began to notice the small details she had overlooked before. The carving of a strange symbol on the stone, almost hidden beneath layers of soot and age. It looked like a stylized flower, its petals swirling inward, leading her eye toward the center. She reached out to touch it, and as her fingers brushed the stone, she felt a faint vibration beneath her touch. Her breath caught in her throat. Could it be? Was this another clue, another hidden feature waiting to be discovered? She ran her fingers along the symbol, and to her surprise, part of the stone shifted under her touch. The piece of the fireplace gave way, revealing a small, narrow compartment hidden deep within the wall. It was dark, too dark to see clearly, but she could feel the air shift as if something had been disturbed. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and shone it into the opening, her heart racing with anticipation. There, nestled in the shadows, was a small metal box. Its surface was tarnished, but it was clearly old, probably just as old as the house itself. She carefully pulled it free, her hands trembling with excitement. As she opened it, she found something that made her pulse quicken even more. A set of old documents, neatly folded and tied with a ribbon, along with another map. The documents were delicate, their edges curling with age. She unfolded them carefully, her eyes scanning the elegant script that filled the pages. The first page was a letter, written by Henry Brooks himself. It was dated nearly a century ago, and the words seemed to reach out to her with a sense of urgency. "Whoever finds this," it began, "I trust you will know what to do. The vault beneath the house must be protected at all costs. It is a treasure of knowledge, not of gold. The key will unlock what lies hidden, but beware. It is not a treasure for those who seek only wealth. The truth is far more valuable." Her heart raced as she read on, each sentence revealing more about the mysterious vault. According to the letter, the vault was not merely a chest of riches, but a storehouse of knowledge, something that Henry had spent his life collecting and protecting. The contents of the vault were meant to be passed down to someone who would use them wisely. He had hidden the vault so well, she realized, that no one had even discovered it in all these years. The second page of the document was a list of instructions, specific steps to follow in order to locate the vault and unlock its secrets. It seemed like a complicated process with codes and symbols to decipher, but as she studied it, she began to realize that the instructions weren't meant to be followed blindly. They required thought, patience, and a careful understanding of the house's hidden features. Each step was connected to something in the house itself, something she had seen but never fully understood. And there, at the bottom of the final page, was a final note from Henry Brooks. It read simply, The truth lies where the shadows meet the light. She stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. What did it mean? The shadows in the light. Was it a clue to a hidden spot in the house? Or perhaps a symbolic reference to something deeper? Her mind buzzed with possibilities as she folded the documents back into the box and placed it carefully on the table. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She had found another piece of the puzzle, but the next step was even more important. She needed to figure out what the letter and the map meant and where they were leading her. With the evening growing darker, she decided to take a break and clear her head. She went for a walk around the property, her thoughts still racing with everything she had discovered. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with hues of pink and orange. The house stood in the distance, quiet and still, but somehow more alive than ever before. As she wandered down the path leading to the garden, she found herself standing in front of the old sundial again, the one that had caught her attention so many days ago. The sun had set now, and the shadows from the surrounding trees stretched long across the yard. The sundial was quiet, its needle pointing toward the horizon, where the light had disappeared. It was then that she understood what the letter had meant. The shadows meeting the light weren't a physical location. They were a moment, a transition between two states. She realized that it wasn't just the house she needed to focus on. It was the time of day. There was something important about the way the light shifted, about the way the house looked in the late afternoon, when the sun's rays stretched across the land, casting long shadows. Could it be that the key had to be used at a specific moment, when the house was bathed in a particular light? It was a strange thought, but it made sense. Henry Brooks had hidden everything so carefully, so intentionally. The key, the vault, the clues. It wasn't just about finding the right place in the house. It was about finding the right time. She headed back inside, determined to try the key once again, but this time she would do it when the shadows met the light. The next few days were going to be crucial. She had to get it right. The treasure, she was starting to realize, wasn't just something physical. It was a discovery of a different kind, one that could change her life and perhaps even the world, in ways she couldn't yet understand. The days that followed felt like a blur of anticipation. Each time she woke up, the first thing on her mind was the vault, the key, and the secrets that might lie hidden in the house. She had spent hours studying the letter and the map, going over every tiny detail again and again, hoping for a breakthrough. But it felt as if the pieces were still scattered, like a puzzle with a few key parts missing. One thing had become clear to her. Henry Brooks had been incredibly meticulous in hiding whatever it was he wanted protected. The more she thought about the letter and the map, the more she began to realize how carefully everything had been planned. It was as if the house itself was a living entity, its walls and floors designed to keep everything concealed. Even the shadows played a part in the mystery. She had spent days walking around the house at different times, observing how the light shifted, how the sun's rays created shadows that seemed to move with purpose. The letter had said that the truth lay where the shadows meet the light. But what did that really mean? Was there a specific time she needed to be in the right place? The answer came one evening when she was standing in the hallway near the stairs, staring at the window that faced the garden. The sunlight was beginning to dip, casting golden beams across the room. She watched as the shadows from the tall trees outside began to stretch, slowly creeping into the corners of the room. It was a beautiful sight, almost surreal, the way the light and shadows seemed to dance together, like two old friends greeting each other after a long separation. And then, just as the last ray of light slipped beneath the horizon, something happened, a slight shift. The shadows seemed to meet at a specific spot on the wall just beside the staircase. She couldn't explain it, but it felt like the house was whispering to her, urging her to follow the path the shadows had formed. Her heart raced as she crossed the room, stepping carefully toward the spot where the shadows converged. She reached out and touched the wall, her fingers brushing against the cold stone, and that's when she felt it, another shift. The wall, which had always seemed so solid, suddenly gave way, just like the fireplace had before. She stumbled back in shock, her breath catching in her throat. Could it really be this easy? Taking a deep breath, she pressed forward, carefully peering into the opening. It was narrow at first, just enough space for her hand to slide in. But then, as she shifted the stone aside, the opening grew wider. It wasn't a large space, but it was enough to reveal a small hidden compartment behind the wall, Her heart was pounding now, and she felt the familiar rush of excitement flood her chest. Inside the compartment there was another box, this one even smaller than the last, but it looked just as ancient. Its edges were worn, and the surface was covered in a thin layer of dust. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect, before carefully lifting the box from its resting place. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Inside there was another map, this one even older than the others. The paper was yellowed with age, and the ink had begun to fade, but she could still make out the markings. The map depicted the same house, but now there were new details. The symbols were more elaborate, and it seemed to indicate more hidden locations, each marked with a series of numbers and symbols that made little sense to her at first. Along with the map was another letter, this one written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. The letter seemed to be from someone else entirely, someone who had discovered the house's secrets long after Henry Brooks had passed away. The letter read, "I've uncovered what Henry left behind, but I fear I am not the one to uncover its true meaning. I've found the vault, but it is not what we thought. The key will only work if you understand the codes. You must be careful. This is not just about wealth, but something far more dangerous." Her stomach tightened as she read the words. Dangerous? The idea of treasure, of something valuable, had never felt so distant. Now there was a sense of urgency in the letter, a warning that made her feel like she was stepping into something far beyond her understanding. The letter continued, "I've tried to decode the symbols, but they do not reveal their secrets easily. There is a connection between the maps, the key, and the house itself. You must not give up. Time is running out." Her mind raced. What did this all mean? Henry Brooks had hidden something far greater than just a vault of riches. But what could be so dangerous that it needed to be protected for all these years? And why had someone else left a letter behind urging her to proceed with caution? She folded the letter and tucked it away in the box, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. It was clear now that the treasure wasn't just material, it was something far more significant, something that had to be protected. But what was it? And why had Henry gone to such great lengths to keep it hidden? That night she barely slept. Her mind was too full of questions, of symbols and codes that made no sense. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of something big, something that could change everything. But she was also scared. What if the treasure was something that shouldn't be found? What if uncovering it would lead to something she wasn't ready for? The next morning she woke up early, unable to shake the thoughts that had kept her awake all night. She knew what she had to do. She needed to decipher the symbols on the new map and figure out how they connected to the house itself. The answer was somewhere within the walls, within the very structure of the house. She spent the entire day studying the map, matching symbols to the ones she had seen before. It was painstaking work, and there were moments when she felt like she was getting nowhere. But as the day went on, she began to see patterns, connections she hadn't noticed before. The symbols weren't random, they had meaning. They were a code, one that would unlock the next phase of the mystery. As dusk fell, she stood in front of the house, the fading light casting long shadows across the yard. The map had led her here, to this spot, and she knew she was close. She ran her fingers over the house's walls, tracing the lines and symbols, searching for the final clue. She could feel the key in her pocket, its weight reminding her that she was on the brink of something incredible. Then, as if by instinct, she knew where to go. She turned toward the back of the house, to a small overgrown garden she had hardly noticed before. The weeds had taken over, but beneath them she could see the outline of a stone pathway that led toward a secluded corner of the property. This was it, the spot where everything would come together. With her heart in her throat, she began to clear the weeds away, her hands shaking. Beneath them, there was a small hidden door, a door that had been buried for years, just waiting to be found. She took a deep breath and pressed the key into the lock. The door opened with a creak, and behind it, waiting in the darkness, was the vault. The door creaked as it slowly swung open, revealing a dim, narrow passage hidden behind the thick walls of the house. Her heart pounded, the weight of everything she had uncovered pushing down on her chest. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She had found the hidden door, the vault, the treasure. But now what? What lay beyond this entrance? She took a step forward, her flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The air inside the passageway was cool and musty, and the floor beneath her feet was uneven, as if the house had settled and shifted over the years. The faint smell of earth and old wood filled her nose, mixing with the scent of something metallic. The walls around her seemed to close in, as though the house was holding its breath, waiting for her to discover its secrets. As she moved further into the passage, the faint light from the flashlight flickered against the stone walls, casting long shadows that danced with the rhythm of her movements. Her mind raced. What had she truly uncovered? Was it just treasure, coins, jewels, or something far more valuable? Or had she stumbled upon something darker, something meant to remain hidden for eternity? Her footsteps echoed in the silence, a steady reminder that she was alone. There was no one here to guide her, no one to help her interpret the symbols or understand the warnings in the letters. She had come this far on her own, and now, with the vault within reach, it was her choice to make. Would she open it? Would she face whatever lay inside? The passage grew narrower as she continued, the ceiling low enough that she had to duck slightly. She could feel the weight of the house pressing down on her, as though it were aware of her presence, as though it were alive. The strange vibrations she had felt before when she touched the symbols and key were back, humming beneath her skin. It was as if the house was watching her, waiting for her to make her move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached the end of the passage. Before her stood a solid iron door. It was old, its surface marked with rust and signs of age, but it was unmistakable. This was the vault. She had found it. The key, the same one she had carried with her through every step of this journey, still rested in her pocket. She pulled it out now, the metal cool and heavy in her hand. It felt strangely warm as she held it, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment. She could feel the vibrations in the air grow stronger, the pull of the vault calling to her. With trembling hands, she slid the key into the lock. For a moment, nothing happened. The door didn't budge. She stood frozen, holding her breath, waiting for the click that would confirm whether she was right. Had she truly found the vault? Or was it all just an elaborate puzzle with no answer? And then, with a soft, almost inaudible sound, the lock gave way. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a small, dimly lit room beyond. The vault was unlike anything she had imagined. It wasn't a grand golden chest filled with jewels or coins, but a simple stone room, its walls lined with shelves. On those shelves were dozens of old books, scrolls, and artifacts, ancient, dust-covered relics that seemed to hum with a strange, forgotten energy. She stepped inside, her flashlight illuminating the room, casting long shadows on the stone walls. There was something eerie about the silence that enveloped her, as though the room had been untouched for centuries. But despite the dust and decay, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything here was significant, that each object held a piece of something much larger than her. She walked carefully toward one of the shelves, her eyes scanning the rows of books. Each one seemed to contain something different. Some were bound in leather, others in strange materials she couldn't quite identify. There were scrolls, each wrapped in twine and sealed with wax, as though they had been waiting for someone to uncover them. As she reached for one of the books, a sudden chill ran down her spine. It was as if the very act of touching the object had triggered something. A ripple in time, a shift in the air. She pulled her hand back instinctively, but then, after a moment of hesitation, she reached forward again, more slowly this time, as if expecting something to happen. This time nothing happened. The book remained still in her hand, its leather cover worn and cracked with age. She opened it carefully, turning the pages with the gentleness of someone handling a fragile artifact. The words inside were written in a language she didn't recognize, the script strange and flowing, almost like a dance of ink on the page. Her pulse quickened as she flipped through the pages, unable to make sense of the text but drawn to it all the same. She couldn't explain why, but the symbols felt familiar, almost as though she had seen them before. They echoed the same patterns from the map, from the key, from the symbols on the walls of the house. It was all connected, she realized. This wasn't just a vault filled with random items. It was a collection of knowledge, a treasure trove of information meant to be unlocked and understood. She placed the book back on the shelf and turned to the next one. This time it was a thick scroll, its edges frayed and yellowed. It was wrapped tightly with twine, and as she unwound it, the smell of old parchment filled the air. Unfurling it carefully, she saw that it was covered in diagrams, intricate drawings of constellations, celestial bodies, and stars. At the center of the scroll was a diagram of the house itself, with strange markings and symbols that seemed to match the ones she had discovered around the property. She realized, with a shock, That this scroll wasn't just a collection of drawings. It was a map, an astronomical map, detailing the alignment of the stars and their connection to the house. The house itself seemed to have been built in alignment with the stars, its design reflecting the cosmic patterns above. The vault, the key, the symbols, they were all part of a much larger scheme, one that connected the house to the stars, to the universe itself. She stared at the map, feeling a sense of awe and wonder. This wasn't just a treasure hidden for wealth or power. This was knowledge about the universe, about the stars, and perhaps even about the very fabric of time and space itself. She had uncovered something beyond her wildest imagination. The vault wasn't just a secret hidden beneath the house. It was a doorway to understanding something far greater than herself. The truth about the house, about Henry Brooks, and about the treasure he had hidden was still unfolding before her eyes. But as she stood in the vault, surrounded by ancient books and scrolls, a strange feeling washed over her. It was a sense of responsibility, a realization that the knowledge contained here was not meant to be kept hidden forever. The house had been waiting for someone to find it, to understand it, to use it. And now that someone was her. The room seemed to close in around her as she stood in front of the shelves, her mind racing. What was she supposed to do now? She had the knowledge, but what was the next step? What would happen if she unlocked the final secret? The air seemed to hum with the weight of the question. The house was waiting. The vault was waiting. And now it was her turn to decide.